Hello, everybody. My name is Heidi. I'm 16 years old, and I've got two mothers. How is that even possible? Let me tell you. It's a long story. I was actually born in Boston, and my mother had a really difficult delivery. I was all right, but she lost a lot of blood and slipped into a coma. The doctors couldn't manage to find either my father or any of my other relatives, and they couldn't make any predictions about my mother's condition either, so they had no option but to give me to a foster family. They agreed that I would live with them until my mother woke up from her coma, if she did. But years went by. I turned 6 years old, but it still hadn't happened. My foster mom and dad didn't tell me that I wasn't their real daughter, so I lived a happy life with my beloved mommy and daddy in a small town in Minnesota. I couldn't have wished for a better family until it was my father's birthday, and we had a big party at home with all of our friends, a barbecue, and fireworks. We were having so much fun. My father's phone was ringing off the hook because there were so many people who wanted to wish him a happy birthday. But then there was another call. My father picked up his phone merrily, expecting another greeting. But then the smile was wiped from his face. He went pale. I was really worried, but he said that everything was fine. After the party, my parents went to their room and shut the door. I tried to eavesdrop, but I couldn't make out what they were talking about because they were whispering. But then my mom burst into tears. That was far too frightening for me, so I knocked on the door and asked my parents to let me in and to tell me what was going on. And then they told me the truth. They told me about my real mother and her coma and about the phone call. My foster dad was informed that my mother had woken up from the coma, and after a little treatment, she would be able to have her daughter back as agreed. I was absolutely dejected. I begged my parents not to give me back. I think I'd cried my eyes out, but there was nothing we could do about it. So, in a couple of weeks, my parents took me back to Boston. My real mother met us at the airport. She looked very nice and friendly, and she immediately started crying when she saw me, but I didn't feel anything at all. I was squeezing my foster mom's hand and didn't want to let it go. We all went to a cafe and walked around town. My mother tried to make conversation with me, but I never said a word. Soon the moment to say farewell had come. My parents spent one night with us, but when I woke up in the morning, they were not there. There was only a little note on the table. It said, "Always remember." And there was a little picture of us all together. So I was left alone in that new city with that unknown woman who I was supposed to call Mom now. She brought me to my new home, which was really cozy, and there was a separate room for me with a bed and new clothes and toys. My mother did her best to get along with me. She cooked, showed me around town, took me to the zoo. She would buy me anything I would ask for. And I started to like her, actually, but I really missed my family. Once I worked up the courage and asked her if I could go visit my home in Minnesota, but she wouldn't let me. She said that she realized it was hard, but it would be better for me not to communicate with my foster mom and dad for my own good. She said we had to turn over a new leaf together. I got really mad. I wanted to go home so badly that I decided to run away. I packed my little suitcase and headed for the hills. I Googled the way to the bus station. It happened to be not that far away from the place we lived. Of course, I got caught and brought back after I'd tried to buy a one-way ticket to my hometown. My mother was in despair, and she made the worst decision ever. She decided to move to another state in the South without even letting my foster family know about it. It turned out that my grandparents lived there, but my mother hadn't spoken to them for years. They knew nothing about her coma or about me. She also forbade me to call or to email my foster mom and dad and wouldn't give me their contact information. The only thing I had was that family picture. Even though it looked like a happy ending, my grandparents were so happy to see me and to finally make up with their daughter after so many years. I never stopped thinking about my family in Minnesota. It's been a while. I became a teenager, I went to school, and I had a lot of friends there. I loved my grandparents to bits, but not my mother. She was strict, and I was never allowed to do anything. I wasn't a good student, and she would always punish me for bad grades. We had fights and arguments all the time. I started to hate her, and for me, she still remained the person who had taken me away from my beloved foster parents. I didn't know anything about them. There was no way that I could contact them. I sent paper letters to my home address in Minnesota hoping that they would be delivered, but I never got an answer. I didn't want to believe that the people who loved me and cared about me for so many years could forget about me so easily. There must have been something that was preventing them from writing me back. And I thought my mother was the one to blame. I thought things couldn't get worse until that day. My friend told me he was throwing a slumber party because his parents had gone away, so he invited me and all my friends over. I asked my mom if I could go, but of course I got a no. She said I had to improve my grades first, then I could think about parties. It didn't stop me, though. When everybody went to sleep, I climbed out the window and went to the party. My friends and I had a great time there, but when I showed up at home in the morning, my mother was waiting for me in my room. She was furious. We had the worst fight ever. We kept going at each other. When I finally said, "You are not my mother and you never will be. I'm going to leave school and go back home to my real parents," she didn't say anything and quietly left the room, stone-faced. Later that evening, somebody knocked on my door. It was my grandpa. He's been my best friend and support all these years. He told me that it was not reasonable and smart to leave school just to annoy my mom. He said that we had both suffered a lot and had hard times, but we had to try to understand and accept each other. He also revealed why my mother had left him and my grandma so many years ago. She got pregnant, and my grandma and grandpa were against the baby, against me. My grandpa said how much he regretted his behavior, so my mother made up her mind to leave and to raise the baby all alone. Her boyfriend didn't support her either. So she left college because she had to work to earn a living and didn't even get a proper education in the end. That's why she cares about my studies so much. Now I was very ashamed of myself. I have never thought about all those difficulties my mother had to go through in her life. I went up to her the next morning and apologized for my words. I promised not to leave school and to improve my grades. I asked her why she had never told me her story. She wrapped me in a big hug and said that she was so sorry about what had happened to both of us. She also said it was bad of her not to let me get in touch with my foster family, because it had made things much worse. And then she handed me a ticket to Minnesota. I couldn't believe my own eyes. I was going home. Unfortunately, neither me nor my mother managed to find any contacts with my foster mom and dad. It's been so many years. So I sent one more paper letter home and started off, hoping for a miracle. I arrived at the airport, but nobody met me there. Anyway, I had the address and found my house easily. It didn't take me much time to recognize it, and it looked exactly the same. I was immediately flooded with memories from my childhood. I was standing at the front door with my heart beating, not being able to ring the doorbell for a long time. And then I did. A beautiful woman opened the door and I was sure I didn't know her. I asked her about my parents. She heaved a deep sigh and then let me in. She gave me some tea and told me the whole story. It turned out that after my real mother took me away from my foster mom and dad, everything went wrong. They started arguing and blaming each other every day. It was their first experience in adopting children, and it turned out to be a far too painful one. And it all led them to a painful divorce. My foster mother left and nobody knew where she was. She probably moved to another country. My father married again, and that very woman was his new wife, and they had a baby. So I kind of had a little sister now. But a couple of years ago, my dad died in a car accident. I was devastated. It seemed like I was bad luck for everyone I loved. His new wife showed me around the house. I got acquainted with my little sister, who now lived in my room. When I was leaving, I asked the woman about the letters I had been sending all those years. She said that it was a mutual decision of both of my families not to get in touch with each other. They thought it would be better for me to keep going. She also confessed she had been hiding my letters because she thought it would be too painful for my foster dad to read them, not having the right to answer back. It all made sense now. I left the house and went to his grave. Then I visited all the places I used to love in my town. I went to the park where I used to play tennis with my dad, and to the cafe where my mom would always get me the most delicious ice cream in the world. And I came back home with nothing on one hand, but on the other, my soul was finally at peace. I visited my hometown to find out that there was no home for me anymore. That was the truth that I had to find out. But I know I have my loving family who is there for me and waiting for me. Of course, the news that my foster father had passed away broke my heart, and I still don't have any information about my foster mom. I hope I will be able to find her someday. This trip helped me to calm down and to accept everything that had happened to me and both of my families. I started to spend more time with my mother, and we are on good terms with each other now. I feel I have a place I belong again.
Hello, I'm Lindsay, and I am such a mess. I am in deep, deep trouble, and I need to concentrate in order to tell you what I have to tell. And I am not at my worst right now. Wait, I need to tell you what my problem is. Well, I have OCD, which is obsessive-compulsive disorder. Here, I've told you. I am so ashamed. Thank God it's anonymous. Okay, well, concentrate. I'm 15, and I'm on my way towards happiness, and happiness for me is when those thoughts leave me. Right, I haven't told you what OCD is. Sorry for that. I will tell you what it's about and give you some examples, okay? So, it's actually when you have some thoughts all the time and they don't leave you, and you're afraid that you can make something horrible. And you become so ashamed of yourself that you're trying to prevent things from happening, even if you don't want to do them. It sounds pointless, I know, but I told you I'm a mess. I'm 15 now. Many years ago, I was adopted. I don't like to remember that time, but, well, I think it may be useful for understanding. Anyway, point is that my biological father was in jail, and my biological mother didn't take any care of me at all. I was 5 at the time, and my problem is that I still remember everything. I heard that some people just forget things that are traumatic, but that's not my case. Those recollections have been stalking me forever. But I was adopted soon after, and I adore my parents. I will call them Mom and Dad, if you don't mind. So, they took me home, and everything was finally okay. They brought me to a psychologist to elaborate my trauma, and after all, everyone thought I was over it. Well, yes, I was more or less. However, when I was around 7 years old, I started having that thing. What thing? Well, don't laugh at me, but it went like this. For example, I'm just sitting calmly in my room, and I feel I absolutely need to go and check if I've closed the door to the bathroom. Well, who cares if it's closed? What's the difference? But still I get up and go there to check. It's closed. I return to the room. I sit down and think, but I haven't checked if it's closed well. I get up and go to check. It's closed well. I return, sit down and think, am I really sure I've closed it well after checking? And so on for 5 or 6 times. I understand it's stupid, but I feel if I don't do it, something horrible happens. I just can't control myself. Okay, that was when I was 7. Now I've gone much, much further. Those strange ideas multiplied in my head. I had to check and recheck that I had everything in its place. Everything in order, all the plates in the kitchen arranged by colors, and all my shoes in the closet perfectly aligned. I passed a great deal of every day in strange rituals, making sure everything was fine. But things I had to check were more and more every day. And what's worse, I suddenly started feeling guilt. I understood I was not normal, and as far as I was adopted, I felt bad that my wonderful parents got a freak like me. So I didn't want to tell them I had problems so that they didn't get disappointed with me. As I grew, I had lots of other obsessive thoughts. I wanted to be a perfect daughter for my parents, and I was constantly afraid I would embarrass them somehow. When I was with them in public, I was terrified that at some point I would start shouting obscenities. Why should I, you ask? And why shouldn't I? This can happen to anyone. This is my thought. And I was constantly afraid it was me. I started thinking about it over and over. I try not to think about it, but it's like not thinking about a polar bear. You literally can't think of anything else. There were more fears to that. That I could cut my mom's new dress into pieces, that I could spill coffee all over my dad's laptop, and many, many more. I couldn't study or do anything else. I was just thinking about it all the time. Every time I had such thoughts, that's pretty much all the time, I went to take a shower. It was ritual for me that made me feel like a better person. I have no idea what the connection is, but I was sure that at some point that it was the only thing that kept me from doing that horrible stuff I was thinking about. But the obsession was growing in me like a snowball, and one day when I was 13, I had a breakdown. On Saturday morning, I had some particularly nasty thought of spitting in my mom's coffee, and felt so much guilt that I went into the shower and never got out. I mean, I don't remember much. My parents told me that they saw I was absent in the bathroom for more than an hour. They checked on me, I was not responding, and when they broke down the door, they found me under the shower, scratching my skin obsessively with a sponge, repeating, "I won't do it! I won't do it!" I got scared. Ironically, my mom tells me now that they feel guilt they didn't notice something was wrong with me. She knew I was a bit strange, but she thought it was due to my childhood trauma, and it didn't seem to bother me too much. You bet it didn't. I was controlling myself very well. Anyway, they took me to a psychiatrist immediately. After I calmed down and regained senses, we had a talk. Putting a long story short, I found out what OCD is, got a prescription, and an appointment with a therapist. I'm now controlling it much better, and Mom and Dad are helping me a lot. But I'm still scared of myself. Who knows how it can finish another time? However, now I always tell my parents if I feel something is wrong. Now, my motto is concentration and control. Concentration and control.